Right, so I've took all the bolts out of the engine, and that's that one down there. I've managed to pull it out of the frame, and I've laid the bike down on the floor, and I've got the other engine, and I've just chucked it over the top of the frame, and straight away you can see there's a big problem. The back wheel's way too close to the frame. It's way too close to the engine. I think we're going to have to extend the back wheel out a little bit. So I'm going to rebuild this back end. I need to put new bars going across here, top and bottom. That's for the suspension, and this is the swing arm bolt, obviously. So I'm going to rebuild this out of a bit of 2-inch by 1-inch box section steel. Got some line in the garden, I reckon. As for the engine though, I think we're going to have to probably cut the frame down here somewhere, cut the frame up here, take this makeshift seat off, sort of just mount the engine to this back end bit of the frame, rebuild this swing arm with the wheel a little bit further back, so then we've basically just got an engine attached to a back wheel, and then try and reattach the front end of the bike back on, really. You know, because this is a pretty decent sized engine. As far as I'm aware, it is a 200cc 5-speed. Now this frame is just from one of those 50cc kids bikes, like. Right, so I've pulled the back wheel off. This is obviously the swing arm. See how small it is. And then I need to sort this back wheel out, actually. So I was going to do this next, but I've had a look at this back wheel, and this back wheel is absolutely trashed. So the bearings are actually completely knackered and don't even fit the shaft. So this is the hub on the other side, and the bearing does fit on this side. The bearings are both the wrong type, so they've got no casings on. There isn't any kind of like centralising pillar in there or anything like that. It's just on nuts and bolts, and that's it. The inside of this is the exact same diameter as the inside of there. And then I've got this bearing, which is much wider than most bearings. So I'm going to create a sleeve that joins these two together, and then I'm going to push this smaller bearing into the centre so it looks something like that. Okay, so this is the little part that we just made. That will get pressed into there. This bearing slips perfectly inside of there. And then obviously this collar goes inside the gear, just like that. And then this will sit inside the wheel, and it should align it absolutely perfectly with the centre. So I've cut a few standoffs. These are 5, and this is 8mm bar. So there's already a few holes in this rim, and I don't really want to drill any more holes. We've basically got like 5 8mm studs here that the sprocket will be sort of attached to. These go through the tyre as well, so I can weld them, you know, I can get a pretty good weld on them on the other side as well. And that's kind of what it looks like on the back, really. A complete mess, but you know, it's what we've got. So I'm going to slip the gear on. It comes perfectly up to the top. Alright, so I got this spacer finished. That's going to sit in between the two bearings. Now I've just got to press this bearing into this mangled up hub, and it should fit fine. The bearings fit on snug. Right, so these are the parts that we've been making. It's basically just 2 wheel spacers and then an axle. See, this is the new one, and this was the original. Just an absolute mess. So we've got 1 spacer here, which is for the side with no cog on. And then on the other side, we've got the slightly longer spacer. And that's basically it. Right, so that's the seat cut off. And that's basically all it was. Just a bit of a triangle shaped bit of metal. I'm going to cut all this side arrangement on. This is what held the gear reduction for the original engine. I'm going to chop all this side off, and then I'm going to have a look at sizing the other engine up, the new one that's just up there. Alright, so I've cut the red plate off, as obviously you could see. I've cut the side bits off and that, and they're all there, except for the little plate that the original 50cc engine sat on. This frame is practically back to stock right now. Right, so this was the old swing arm, and I've cut 2 new bits of steel that are going to make up the new swing arm. And this is 1 inch by 2 inch box section steel. I'm also going to do some thick steel spacers to go inside this tube to stop it from crushing when you tighten the bolts up, basically. 10 centimeters longer than the original swing arm, and I'm probably going to be using a little bit of that up front. I'll be using a little bit up that for the back. I'm going to make a slider for the rear wheel. I think by the time we're done, the back wheel is probably going to sit about 5 centimeters further back. That's basically it. Just a slot, nice slot in that steel. Just got to do the same with the other bit of steel. Right, so I've got these rear swing arms just quickly mounted. That's the axle that we made that's going through, and then just the few wheel spacers that I've got. The width of this new rear arm is kind of like half in the frame and half out the frame. So what I've got here is just a car jack. I've got it underneath where the rear arm sits. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jack this up and bend open this frame a little bit. Right, that's definitely jacked it open a good amount there. I think I measured this around somewhere like 7 or 8 inches or something. What's that, 180mm? And now we're at nearly 200, so we're over a little bit, but that's fine, we can bend it back. Right, so these are the 2 bits of steel that we cut the slot into. Now I just need to drill a hole in the other side for the swing arm to attach. This is where the bolt's going to go through, that the arm's actually going to swing on. So I'm going to drill a hole through both of these, and then I'm going to mill a square just through one side of both of these. And then what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to use a bit of square box section to hold these 2 together. So after we're finished, we've got something like this. I've tucked the corners back a little bit as well, and that's just so this box section can actually sort of fit in there. That sort of goes through there now, and it's going to give it a hell of a lot more support. And then I'll run the bolt through the box section. So this is the second one, and obviously it just sits like that, and I can get a nice weld all the way around and get a bit of a weld on the inside as well. Both rear arms, and I've G-clamped them together, and I've drew some lines on here. I'm going to cut a small section out of this, and I've got some of this same stuff again, 2 inch by inch box section, and I'm going to lie that across. Obviously when these are separated, one will be here, one will be here, this box section should sit on the inside. Right, so I've cut the majority of the material out with the grinder. Now I'm just going to go in with the milling cutter and really clean these up and just get them both to exactly the same length. Right, so this is what we've got so far. We've got all these pieces, and then we've got the swing arm shaft here. This is the long bolt that the swing arm's going to hang off. We've got this bit of box section that is going to fit in both sides here. And then we'll have this cross beam that goes in somewhere around here, like that. So now we've got a pretty sturdy back end, and without even having any welding on it, it's pretty well held together. Now I'm just looking at making new tabs. These are the tabs here, and I've just pulled this bit of steel up and drew around it, and then I'm going to cut that out with a grinder, this sort of shape here. I've got the rough location here. I'm going to go through with this 6mm bit, and then I'm going to go through with this 12.5mm bit. Now when I jacked this apart, obviously it jacked them apart and it made them a bit angled. I just want to bring the ends around so they sit flat. So I've got this bit of metal here and I'm just going to strategically hammer on this portion here. So hopefully now you can sort of see that these come down and then they straighten off. Right, so this is where we're at the minute. Top side, you can see we've got the spacer in one side, spacer in the other side, and then we've got the space that goes into the bearings. Right, so I've got all this pretty much put together. I've got the back wheel on, I've got this on. Obviously everything's loose at the minute. Everything's just loose. I've not threaded this bar. It doesn't actually need to be tight, it just needs to hold the rear end on. I'm probably just going to put clips on both sides. So I've got some pretty good welds around there. Not the best looking welds, but I can tell you it's definitely got it. And then these extra tabs. Got these extra tabs on. And that's just going to give it a lot of extra support. Right, so I've just got it propped up on a little bit of wood at the minute. It sits where I need it to be. I've just loosely put a bolt through this just to hold this little cup on. It's sat about right. So I'm going to weld it about there somewhere, give it a quick tack, and then I'll pull the bolt off and weld it all up properly. Finish welding that on there, actually still literally red hot. And that is practically the bike fully back to normal. We can have a look at putting the engine in there. I've chucked this engine onto a few blocks of wood to sit it off the floor, and I've literally just dropped the frame on top of it, and this is kind of what we're looking at the minute. You know, we're looking at something like this. It sort of does and doesn't fit quite well at the same time, to see what size it is. Right, so this was the little bit of the frame that I cut out, and then I did have to keep chopping bits out as well until I got it just right, and now it's getting quite exciting. Just chopping out that little bit of frame has made this whole engine sit not right, but perfect. As for mounting, I've been cutting strips of this 6mm steel. We've got one that's going to go up here like that, another one round on the other side, and this one is going to go from the top there onto where the suspension's mounted to. Engine's back up on the workbench. Got the bike flipped upside down. These are the two supports that we've got in place at the minute. Tacked them in spot. Just got to go over and weld it properly. Right, so now the bike is practically on its own steam. Ground clearance not a problem. Loads of ground clearance. This bracket, you know, I need to chop this down here so it doesn't interfere with that there. Right, so I've welded the sprocket up and got that fitted on. So the chain wants to sit right through this centre beam here. I've had a bit of a look, and this is the axle, not the axle, sorry, this is the bar or the rear swing arm. Found another bearing that fits. I'm going to turn the inside of this sprocket out, the bearing, so there'll be a sprocket, just a free running sprocket in the centre of this swing arm. And then obviously to support it, I'll bring a little bit of a box section down here. So this is what I've got so far then. I've got two washers on both sides for these 12mm bearings, and this is the gear that I've turned out. That will slip over the bearings and that will spin freely. So I've cut a slot in this rear arm, I've put the pin through, and now the chain can sort of run underneath the swing arm. I've cut a little bit of metal and just hit it in there, and that'll be a standoff just to support this end. This was the first spacer I made, and that's just going to sit inside of there. And then this is the other piece that should go and sit inside there like that. Just fits in there, and then it should slide into this end piece. I'll have to just knock it in, but you can see it just fits, that does. We've got the first spacer. I've got a big flat spacer on the back. What I need to do now is I need to weld up all this all round here. I need to weld this one round here. I need to weld this spacer on the inside as well. Right, so I've got this back end welded up. It's just cooling down. Meanwhile, I've just been cutting a little bit of steel, and that's going to be welded on the bottom there, and it's going to go up to the frame just here. And then I've cut another bit of steel, a bit like this, and that's going to sit up there, something like that. So that will get welded onto the bottom there yet again, and that will go up to there like that. Right, so you've just seen me drill a little bit of steel, and that was this up here and this one here, and this is kind of what I'm looking at now. So I'm going to weld a small bar across here. When the engine's rocked forward a little bit, it comes just into place, and then I've cut another little piece that will sit on the side underneath there like that and support this side to this side of the frame. Definitely not winning any awards, but it's definitely not coming apart either. So this is the second engine mount now. The next thing I'm having a look at is putting some box section that goes from the steering column down to these two bolt holes down here. Right, so I've took the steering off and I've cut this bit of metal, shaped it with the grinding disc and a sandpaper wheel, and I've got it just to the right shape, so that will go up there like that, something like that. So that'll go up there a little bit more, and then it'll come down here and it'll get both bolt holes in then. Right, so I went over to the lathe and made these two little spacers, and I found this bar that happens to fit absolutely perfect just in between these two bits of metal. I'm going to weld these two spacers into this bar. I'm going to weld this bar in between both of these spacers. Right, so I've got that bit of steel tacked on there. That's going to be another main engine support. I've cut another bit of steel and bent it a little bit. Right, so this other bit of steel is going to fit right about here. I still need to grind all the welds down and that, but that's going to fit something like that. So it's going to go under there, and it's going to go level with the engine. This is pretty much everything welded up with my signature landlord's paint job, and that's pretty much the frame done now. So after finished painting it, well, should I say after finished welding it, I gave it all a little bit of a grind down. I mean, don't get me wrong, these welds are, yeah. So anyway, I got it all welded up. I gave it a bit of a paint job. I don't normally paint stuff, but I thought, oh well, why not? And then I just basically put it together. So put the rear swing arm on, chuck the engine back in, slid the wheel on, pop the carb on, and that's pretty much it. I did also, I ordered a wiring loom, and it came with this ignition coil, and it turns out that there was this pre-welded bracket on the side where the fairings originally went on. You screwed straight in, same size, 6mm. So as we know, you know, the steering's here, we can't turn it right. Turn it left, but we can't turn right. So I've took the top yoke off, and I believe it's over here. What we sort of need to do is I'm going to get this yoke, but then where the centre bolt is, basically just extend it out like that. Right, so I've cut out my two bits of steel. I'm going to chop off this bit, and we'll get left with this kind of T-shape. What we've got now to do is we've got to basically make two holes for the forks to go through, and then this centre hole here, we just need to move it up to about here. Right, so this is what we've got at the minute. This was the plate that we made, and I've actually put the bolts through both of these. So this is the original yoke that was off the forks, and I've actually just bolted these two together. So we've got all this now, and this will slip over the original forks, and I can just use these to clamp it back on. This is the other one, and I've basically, this was the centre bolt that used to just pivot off. And I've used that to bolt these two together as well. Right, so now the steering is fully attached, it's all properly in place, and that's probably how it's going to be staying. And then I'm using the original clamping mechanism that was on there. I put the handlebars on, and I've also put the clutch on as well. So, and this is where the clutch attaches. I just used a few of these connector blocks and cut the centre out. Except for all the wiring, I did actually end up forgetting a few parts that I needed to weld. I needed to weld a little bar inside of there, just next to the carburetor, and I completely forgot that I actually had to weld on a foot peg as well. I welded the foot peg onto the bottom of the frame, and then I just put up a strip of bar going up that supports right around the bottom of the foot peg. There is one more thing as well, which is the tank. This is the petrol tank. It's only a small one, but cut a small bit of bar, drilled 2 holes in it, and I'm going to mount that on here. So that's going to go something like that. Right, so it's the next day, and I was just going to come in here and the first thing I was going to do is start cutting this exhaust down to size. However, the boiler is packed up, so now I thought I'd basically salvage this. Perfect thickness, I think, to make a battery box out of. I've got the battery just sat in there, and I'm going to sort of trace around the outside of the battery. We sort of need like a tab here that can fold up to the centre of the battery. I'm also going to have a tab that comes out somewhere over here. Right, so this is pretty much it. So this is the battery that I'll be using. It's kind of a big one, but it's the only one that I've got, so... So this is the battery box, all welded on. Right, so for reasons unknown, this battery is packed up on me. The moment that I actually end up making a decent battery box, and I've had to go cut it off. But as it turns out, these batteries don't half kick out some juice. I've made a baby battery box. It's exactly the same way as I made that one down there. So get a normal battery, and there, it won't come out. So this is what I managed to come up with. It's just 2 prongs soldered to a board, and then I've soldered 2 leads to that. Slides onto this battery quite nice. So I've got it all welded on, put a bit of paint on it, wired it all into the main circuit to the starter motor, and basically just screwed it on. Clip the battery in. There we go, that's it. So now I can finally actually move on to the exhaust, which is what I meant to do yesterday. Right, so I've cut the exhaust apart, and I've just chopped out this little bit. If I put this back over here, this is kind of the plug that goes into the engine, and this collar comes around and keeps it in the engine. And when that's in the bike, we can actually turn the handlebars all the way. So we've got full steering now. Right, so I've had another look, and I've chopped out this little piece here. It's going to sit on there somewhere like that, and just come up the side of the bike. Right, so this is the exhaust fully done. Managed to get a good weld around there, and then I welded this small little bracket on as well, and then there's a corresponding bracket on the frame, and it comes down and it just holds onto that bracket there. I started work on a bit of a seat. I've sort of cut out the base of the seat out of a bit of this plywood. I've managed to get an old cushion off of a puffet. But I've been looking, turn the handlebars all the way to the right, there's this gap, this small little gap here. So I've cut this bit of steel, and that is going to go somewhere like there. I've got this other bar, that's going to sneak right down there and weld onto the side of the steering column. I have welded in this beam that I said I was going to weld in round here. So what I've started work on now is the seat. And this is going to be just the base of the seat really. That's all it is. It's just a bit of wood that's been very roughly screwed together. But it does, however, fit absolutely perfectly. Right, so I've chopped a section out of the sponge. It's very, very thick. And I'm sort of left with just a bit of a bag, really. So what I think I'm going to do, this sponge will go down quite a lot. So what I think I'm going to do, put the seat and the sponge and everything like into the bag, wrap the bag around the seat as tight as I can get it, and then just sort of staple it to the back. Right, so I've got the seat done. You know, it's not the best looking thing in the world, but it's actually not too bad really. You know, it fits on the bike. Right, so now the seat is done, I've started work on this sort of metal shield that's going to sit on the underneath of this this bit of frame here. These 2 lines here I need to cut out so I can bend it up and it will get round the suspension. Right, so I've cut the metal and I've made my first bend. Now I need to just chop it at this specific angle, which is going to meet the angle of the frame. That's the panel. That's all it took really. Just a few cuts and a bit of shaping. Alright, so that sits under there like that. And that's going to protect a lot of these electronics. Because obviously with the exhaust being so close, it might melt the zip ties. So I thought I'll just use metal wire instead. So I've started welding on some mounting brackets for the seat. I've got these two tabs here, one there and one here, and then I've bolted this bar on at the back, and it's got two tapped holes in it. So the seat, put this little tab on it, and you can probably see how this goes anyway, but the seat goes under those two at the front, and then it sits down at the back on those two holes in there. Right, so as it stands at the minute, the bike is pretty much done. The only thing I'm not liking is this front wheel. So I've managed to dig out this old trailer tyre. The only thing I need to do now is I need to make a hub for it. And this should be more than big enough to make a decent sized hub. So that's the front wheel all fitted, works an absolute treat. I had to fit the caliper on after because it sits just inside the wheel. It is literally just time to test it now.